Transitions are difficult. They're very hard, right? Transitioning from one room to another, transitioning from activism to policy. My name is Faten Odeh. I'm the executive director of the Cleveland and Northern Ohio chapter of CAIR, Ohio. I am so excited to be your moderator for today's panel. Today's panel is on the advocacy track, from protest to policy, strategy for turning activism into impact. Today, we have a wonderful panel with us, a lot of amazing people, mashallah. We have Sister Hazami Barmada, who is an award-winning social impact strategist, entrepreneur, and humanitarian. I'm sure you've seen her on TV, protesting in DC, mashallah. Thank you for being here. We have Sister Ayah Ziyadeh, who is the former advocacy director for AJP, Americans for Justice in Palestine, and AMP. Thank you for being here. We have Dr. Ismahan Abdullahi, who is the National Executive Director of Muslim American Society and Public Affairs and Civic Engagement. Thank you for being here today. Inshallah. And we have Sister Medea Benjamin, who is the co-founder of Code Pink, a feminist anti-war organization, and Global Exchange, a fair trade advocacy organization. Thank you for being here. Okay, so I always start off with getting the crowd involved. There's a dua that I have a hard time saying, so please help me finish it. Rabbi yashrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahda lisani yafkahu qawli. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Ameen. Okay, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, thank you, Brother Edward. So, if you thought you were going to just come here and sit down and listen, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. It's going to be an interactive workshop, all right? I am a former educator, so I love putting people together, getting minds to think together, but first we're going to ask some questions. And then we're going to get to our little activity, and then we're going to bring it all together, inshallah. My first question, and we'll go just down the row, this is for everybody. How did you find yourself in this role you are in now? Tell us about your journey.
Oh man, okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's so nice to be here and to sit on such a powerful panel of women. Imagine if women ruled the world, what would happen? So my journey, obviously I'm Palestinian, and I'm actually from a village in Qadar Ramallah, which is called Silwad. You may have heard of it. It's called the small village that Israel fears the most, because Israel has been trying to expand its settlements and take our homes, but our men and boys are just so powerful that they literally scare them away. So naturally growing up, I think it's just been in my blood, honestly. Like, that's the easiest answer I could give you. I started organizing when I was 16 in like 2013, and then 2014 came. And at the time, it's crazy that we characterized that war on Gaza as the worst. Compared to today, it's like nothing. And so I started protesting. I'm a writer, so I would write a poem for every protest. We had a protest every week, and I would go out and march and chant and read the poem. But then I went to my senior year of college, so I was about 17 at this point, and I was taking an AP philosophy class, and the teacher would ask us a question every morning that we had class. And this one was, do you think that ignorance is bliss? So myself and one other person went to the side that said, no, ignorance is not bliss. And the rest of the class said yes. So he asked us to explain ourselves. And a guy from the other side went first and said, and I vividly remember this, he said, if what's happening around the world doesn't impact me, why should I care about it? And that changed everything for me. I'm a pretty quiet person. Unless I'm doing my advocacy work, then I have a loud voice. But that day, I just kind of went off because I was so frustrated, especially after watching my people the year prior, what they were going through in Gaza. And then also at that point, I had never gone to Palestine. So I was just so frustrated knowing what our government is doing and how the people here are just so privileged. And that changed everything for me. I graduated a semester early from high school, and at the time I wanted to become a doctor and do Doctors Without Borders. Sometimes I wish I still did that, but I ended up changing my major and studied international human rights. And since then, really, I've dedicated the entire cause to Palestine and advocacy work and criminal justice here in America.
MashaAllah, thank you.
My journey, I've always been a human rights advocate since I migrated to the US. My family lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. And in that moment, I made a tough decision to drop out of college, drive into the storm to try to find my parents. And I had written a letter to my university at the time because they told me that in order to stay enrolled in campus and to be able to be eligible for a refund, I couldn't miss 3 consecutive days of class, which is the absence policy most colleges have. To which I looked at the dean and I was like, I do not want to be in a place or an institution that's talking about humanities, that doesn't believe that I have the right to go and find my parents and make sure they're dead or alive. So thank you, no thank you. But in going out, I wrote this letter that expressed my perspective and how disappointed I was in this establishment. That letter ended up creating something called a Katrina grant that paid the tuition of all students that were impacted by the hurricane, and then an array of things happened after that. And in that moment, I realized standing in my truth, standing in my power, standing in my values, living my values, and not waiting for acceptance of those around me was really powerful. And that kind of lingered in the back of my head, and I did kind of advocacy in a more soft, palatable way. I, went to the United Nations, I joined the institutions, I did everything that I was told I needed to be doing in order to one day get to a place where I had enough power to then shift policies, to change things, to then alleviate human suffering. That does not work. The higher I got in my career, the more credentialed I got. I went to Harvard, I did Georgetown, I did everything that I was told. I became a presidential scholar. The higher I got, the more the restrictions came down on me. The more my funding was at stake, the more that my words were being monitored, the more risk there was to losing a career that was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I realized I'm not in control of myself or my narrative or my passion or my power. And then I had a child. I was later in life. My parents wanted me to have a child much earlier, but here we are. And my child was born into a NICU. He was a premature child born at 29 weeks prematurity. And I still say that and it still makes me choke up. But I watch him fight for his life as I fought for mine. And then this happened in August. He was born August 4, 2023. And then by the time we got out of the hospital was days after October 7, 2023. And I saw children that looked just like mine that were being disconnected from incubators. And I remember how hard I fought for my child. I remember how I argued about how much milk he was getting, how he was being burped. I remember seeing his heart rate drop and the fear. I'm like, my heart is beating now as I go back to that moment. And I thought to myself, who's fighting for those kids? So I resigned. I told them, thank you, no thank you for my job. Did not renew any of my contracts and went to the streets and put my physical body on the line. And I say I went from being in a place where people respected me to going to a place where I respect myself. And that is what birthed a lot of the activism that you see now, which is relentless, in your face, provocative, using art and blood. I just noticed my feet are stained red. We've been doing something called blood dumps, where we dump, red liquid all over the streets of Washington in front of the State Department and White House, and make staff have to walk through it and tell them, you are spilling Gaza's blood. Blood is on your hands, and they physically have to walk through it. And it's so awkward. In those moments of visceral reaction, we can then be able to have a conversation that they're not willing to have. Thank you.
So my name is Ismahan Abdullahi, and what brought me here into this work, I think, is just a lived experience of being a refugee woman, and being a Muslim woman who has always been othered, as so many of us have been in so many different spaces. As early on as within the first year of being in America, where we were put into school, and I had to be I was sitting in a space different from all the other students. Couldn't get the milk and cookies as a kindergartner, right? And so being told during nap time or during learning time to just sit outside of that circle, and not understanding what that experience is, and then later on figuring out what that meant. But I think for me, it's my faith that drives me and my activism, and this firm belief that I am going to be responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to what have I done, even if you don't see the results, if you don't see the outcomes or the fruits of your work, what have I done in that current time that I'm living in to stand up against genocide, to stand up against a lot of the injustices that we're seeing from people being abducted on the streets, from families being torn apart. And for me, I remember when I was in college, and I say this for those who may have gone through this experience, even though I was someone who has faced racism and xenophobia and all the isms that you can think about, it wasn't until college until I actually learned about what's happening in Palestine. I remember my freshman year, and I kept thinking, why are our massajids not teaching us this? Why are our families not having these conversations? How embarrassing is it for me to learn about the fate of my brothers and sisters in Palestine in freshman year of college? I will never forget a lesson that Dr. Hatem Bazian, may Allah bless him, preserve him, and protect him, was giving and talking about the impact of white phosphorus, talking about just the injustice and oppression that's happening in Palestine. And I kid you not, I remember thinking, where was my mind? Why did I not know about this? And I just remember going to the library and doing a research and following up on everything else that Dr. Hatem was recommending, some readings. And I will never forget that feeling, as if I have let down people that I have not met, just simply because of the ignorance in which I was sitting. And so, yes, we're in a time that we are facing a huge, I don't even know what to call it, just this dismissal of the truth and the facts that are in front of your eyes, the dismissal of the humanity of what it means to stand up for people, even if they do look different than you, if they speak a different language than you, they believe in something different. But I always go back to that feeling of, I did not know, but now I do, so what can I do better? And I've committed to the cause since then, alhamdulillah.
Well, just hearing the amazing stories of this wonderful panel and starting out saying that it's so nice to be on a panel of women. You know, it's interesting that so many of the women, the activists that we work with are women. And, you know, Hazami, you talked about the birth of your child being such a fundamental turning point for you. And I started out being an activist, I guess you would say, during the Vietnam War when I was in high school. But I thought I could do something about the world by becoming a nutritionist and going to some of the poorest places in the world and working with malnourished kids. And I had babies dying in my arms who were, you know, African babies who were just happened to be born in a place where there was very little food. And it seemed so unjust to me. And I thought, well, I'm doing the Band-Aid work now, trying to get a electrolyte packet to a child that needs electrolytes. But what's causing that when there are so many resources in the world? And decided I wanted to go more to the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is inequality. The root of the issue is militarism. And so I really then dropped out of being a nutritionist and became a full-time activist, created an organization called Global Exchange, co-founder of a group called Code Pink, and really trying to shift the monumental monster of militarism and have a world where all the babies have a chance. And that's why when we run down the hall after some of these congressmen, we say sometimes, you know, what about the babies? What about the Palestinian babies? Are they responsible? And I think in the end, you know, a lot of our heart for activism comes from wanting a world where all babies are fed, all babies are housed, all babies are treated equally and have an equal chance in life.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing and for your experiences. So a little backstory. I got an email about picking a panel or, you know, something to be a part of for this, you know, this weekend. And I was so excited when I saw that this panel was open because in my experience, I'm finding two groups of people, it seems. people who want to protest and people who think protesting is not something that we should be doing. We should be having conversations and dialogue and doing other ways of advocacy. So this leads me into my next question. Activism often starts as a response to injustice, but turning that into policy can be an uphill battle. What do you believe is the most crucial step in transitioning from grassroots protest to tangible policy change?
Can you hear? Okay. This is such a good question, especially living in the United States. I think you're right that there's two split groups. I would say there's three split groups. People who have no hope, like, especially if you're talking about foreign policy, and then the people that only want to protest, and the people that only believe in, like, policy advocacy. But I will tell you, if you look at the historical movements in the United States, they would not have succeeded without both playing hand in hand, right? Especially in the context of America. Unfortunately, we are in the belly of the beast, literally. Our policies dictate everything in the world, from what kind of food you get and education you get based on your zip code here, and whether you're going to be colonized abroad, whether you're going to get resources in Africa or wherever it is. The United States dictates all of that. So to be in America, to be in the privilege of living in this country, you can't disconnect yourself from policy. And as a person in policy, which I accidentally got into policy, I didn't mean to, but it shows you like how critical it is. I hate it. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's dehumanizing as a Palestinian. It's exhausting. It's very slow, but it is essential. You cannot remove yourself from it if you want any kind of change. From fixing our prison systems here to ending the genocide in Palestine, you have to be involved in policy work. And you have to translate the protest into policy. Protest is good to show that a movement exists. Protest is good to, show them that the masses are against or for a certain thing. Being an advocate in terms of policy is actually showing them, I'm paying attention to what you're doing, and this is exactly what we need to change, right? You can't separate the two. Why is Israel, for example, so successful? And I know this isn't just about Palestine, but that's like the first thing that comes to my head. Israel is so successful because the United States bankrolls its entire apartheid and settler colonial system, right? And how does it do that? Through the Israeli lobby and through funding to Israel. If that were to change, if we were to have a fraction of the power that AIPAC has, so much would change. And when you think about AIPAC, again, AIPAC doesn't just control Palestine policy that impacts Palestine. It controls things here, things that you wouldn't think of. The political prisoners that exist in this country, not in the West Bank or in Gaza, people that exist in this country, Black activists, Palestinian activists, Chicano activists, these people are impacted by the AIPAC lobby as well. What you're seeing right now, how Americans are being impacted, it's a double-edged sword. And so to say it simply, you cannot simply protest and then back up, especially living in America, and be like, okay, that's as far as I'll go. Protest is not enough. It's essential. You need to. Every form of resistance and disruption plays hand in hand. And we're all activists in any space that you're in. For example, the Emmys. I don't watch the Emmys, but obviously it blew up the other day because two people used the space that they're in. They utilized that space to advocate in a place that's so taboo. And Hollywood is such an evil place on every single level. The way it dehumanizes Black people, the way it dehumanizes Muslims, Palestinians, etc. To use that power in the place that you're in, whether you're a doctor, an academic, an actress, whatever you are, you have the power to advocate. And that's why when people say, oh, I'm in this specific field, but I'm not political, how do you think you're living? Every inch of policy impacts your life. And so you have to bridge the gap.
I'll piggyback a little bit on that and say that I think we really need to have a mental shift on what we describe and define as protest and policy. we also need to destigmatize policy and advocacy. And the reason I say that is activist is this like word that makes people go, ooh, right? It's like, it feels like you're like yelling at people and screaming at people. And that's because that's the type of protest that our communities like to show up for once every 3 months, to grab a microphone, scream in it, and then leave. And then from that protest to the other protest, where are y'all? True question. Where is everybody? Because advocacy is about showing up in all spaces consistently with perseverance, with persistence, with endurance, to allow institutions and systems of power to understand that we are not okay with all of this happening funded by our tax dollars in our name. We're not able to influence policy because we are not showing value in our power. We're giving our power away. We somehow are playing into favorability politics. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. We want to be all these things by the very systems that tell you all the time that Islam is somehow scary. You're playing into it by not showing constantly, proudly, that I am Muslim and I am not what you say I am. That is a form of protest, right? So I think we have to really shift this. We need to think about advocacy as a way of shifting hearts and minds. Culture drives political change. Look at any movement in human history. When you have artists and hip hop artists and fashion designers and clothing people and manufacturers and businesses start to change tune, then the politics and the policies follow. But for some reason, we really don't understand how societies work, and then we want to talk about them as if we're not a part of them. We are, right? So when we talk about systems of oppression and I'm this is inshallah a safe space. I see a camera there, but I'm just, bear with me. But, I am so tired of the slogans, from the belly of the beast. Okay, you're in the belly of beast. What are you doing in it? The streets are sanitized. They're quiet. They're silent. They're slogans. Slogans only build power when we put power behind them. You got to show up. You got to be consistent. You have to use your language, your privilege, your art, your talent, your legal connections, your funding, your everything to make these words that are slogans become reality, to where we shift politics. But we're caught up in the slogans still. And talking about moving to political power, they go hand in hand. And part of why I quit my job is I used to be on the other side of teaching people how to do this. And something clicked to me that I need to be doing it, and my example will teach people how to do it. And that is why I made a drastic shift. But I also recognize the privilege in that. And everyone has privilege that they could utilize and give a little bit away of in order to create a system of change. But most of us, our ummah, Muslims, are not willing to make ourselves a little uncomfortable. You can't pray issues away. Even Islamically, if you see injustice, the highest form of iman is what? To do something about it with your hands, with your actions. The second form of iman, a little below it, is what? Do something with your words. What's the lowest form? And it's not to say the prayers are not important, but it's to say we cannot pray away starvation of Palestinians. We cannot pray away ethnic cleansing. We cannot pray away apartheid. You cannot pray away occupation. You cannot pray away genocide. But is our ummah willing to do the work to show up? And it is not one protest every 3 months. It is showing up every day in your schools, at your jobs. Because guess what? How many people are they going to fire? Right now, it's still challenging, and there's a risk because few people are willing to put their necks out there. Yallah, fire every Muslim doctor. Bro, the systems would collapse. Look how many doctors are Muslim in our healthcare facilities in the United States. Look how many teachers are Muslim. Look how many business owners and insurance providers and nurses and custodial staff and janitors and stay-at-home moms and PTA people, but we're still playing favorability politics and trying to pray away issues. And that is where I think the disconnect between what you're talking about, you are more involved in politics than you understand, and you're giving away power. We need to own our power, embrace our power, and step into the values that we preach through our actions.
I think it's been well said by both of the sisters. One of the things I will challenge folks to think about is if you think about protesting and policy, they're tools in a toolbox. And to know which tool to use, when to use it, and how to use it, for me requires one thing, which is, are you reacting to something or are you building something? Oftentimes, we get comfortable with the bare minimum if we're reacting to something. But when we are trying to build, and I really appreciate the entire theme of this Leadership and Policy Conference in charting a just future. What does building towards that just future look like? Are we always just responding to opposition and our perception of the power that they hold? Or are we trying to build coalitions and figure out what tools that we need from this toolbox to chart that just future? Are we just trying to stop a genocide? Or are we also trying to build or work together to build a just future for Palestine? And I think one of the things that CAIR does really, really well, and I'm not saying this, I'm not a CAIR staff member, I'm just saying this because I've seen the work of CAIR for a very, very long time, is building towards that just future. Through the advocacy, through the narrative change, and then also being resisting opposition and the threats that they do receive because of the work that they do. And so for me, it goes hand in hand for sure. But when you are organizing, when you have a vision of what that just future looks like, then you realize when I lean into this toolbox, that which I need to show up for consistently. Right now, what I need is a hammer, and I'm going to take that hammer and keep hammering away. Right now, what I need is a screwdriver, and I'm going to make sure that I can, but I want to make sure those tools are in there, that the tools that I need are in there. And so policy advocacy, working, the past election, how many folks sat out? How many folks were not engaged? Put everything else to the side about the decisions that folks had to make. But why are we opting out of things that actually could bring change? Why are we opting out thinking that one tool is the only tool that we need? Protests are needed, but what are we protesting for and what are we protesting against? One of the things I remember when Mike Brown was shot, and there was a protest that was happening locally, and folks said, oh, we don't need to go to these protests. It's not needed. And I challenged the people, why are we thinking that our voice does not matter in this moment? That we show up to protests for folks to know and understand that we're not okay with the status quo, that we want a narrative change, and I want others to see that you're not alone in opposing this, but have the courage to come out. But when it came to following up on a legislative perspective, the same people who are the protests were not there in these meetings. And so that mind shift is needed. But in order for that mind shift to happen, again, I'm going to go back and end with this question. Are you reacting or are you building? When you're building, it's easier to go into the toolbox and support the organizations who are using different strategies within that toolbox.
Well, I love the wisdom from this panel. And let me just ask a couple of questions. How many of you would buy something at Starbucks? Well, how many of you won't buy something from Starbucks? Okay, so it looks like just about everybody here. How many of you won't buy, and you'll probably tell me it doesn't even exist, Israeli hummus? Okay. Israeli feta? So you're already activists, okay? You're already involved. You're already doing boycott work, and that's really important. And I think the BDS movement is so important, and of course Israel does, because if they didn't think it was important, they wouldn't be putting so much energy into all of these state legislations to try to make it illegal to do what is absolutely should be part of the toolbox, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The other is state work, and I think state work is so important and local work is so important. But I'm working right now on the national level, and so I just want to spend a minute on that. Now, honestly, raise your hand if you know the name of your member of Congress, not your senator, your member of Congress. Okay, I hope that's everybody. Now, honestly, raise your hand if you know the name of the legislative director of your member of Congress. Okay, so look around. There's only a couple of hands up. You all should know the name of your legislative director of your member of Congress, and you should be contacting them on a regular basis. And in fact, they should know your name. And I know, there are Muslims that get out there and yell and do amazing activism, and there's a lot of Muslims who prefer to be much more quiet in the way that they do their activism. So you can have your legislative director know you because you're a pain in the neck and you're yelling at them constantly, or they can know you because you're constantly calling them or sending them an email and say, did you see that the UN just issued a new report on genocide? I'm sending it to you in the email. Did you see this? I'm sending it to you. So either way you want to do it, but you've got to do it because you know what? We are constantly yelling about AIPAC control, and I would like Ayah to tell us more, or maybe afterwards, about how AIPAC affects our lives in the U.S., because that's a really interesting issue to look at. But AIPAC's control of are sending bombs to kill people in Gaza is something that we all care about. And so we say, money, 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 AIPAC has so much money. It's not even the money. AIPAC is well organized. I go to the hearings, and in the front row sitting there so that the Congress people know they're there is the legislative people for AIPAC. When you go to a fundraiser for a member of Congress, AIPAC people are there making it clear that they are AIPAC. They are everywhere. They are everywhere. And right now, they have funded the largest delegation of state representatives throughout the United States in Israel, over 250 of them right now, because they want to get on the state level. So anyway, they are everywhere. We have to be everywhere. And they know their Congress people well. And once Tucker Carlson had said, when he was doing an interview with Congressman Tom Massey, and Tom Massey said that every member of Congress has an AIPAC babysitter, every member of Congress should have a pro-Palestine babysitter. And they should know us, they should fear us or like us, whatever it is, but we should be there in our power. So I say, do your work to get to know the legislative director of your congressman, whether you hate them or like them, it doesn't matter. But be there, be present, and show that we too are well organized and are building, as you say, movement, coalitions, building our power.
Thank you. So, after hearing your comments, it made me think about our work in Cleveland. So in 2023, we started advocating for a ceasefire resolution from our Cleveland City Council. And the door kept getting shut in our face. Even statements were put out saying that Cleveland will never put out a ceasefire statement or a ceasefire resolution. And so protests happened. They were very creative. They were beautiful protests. But then we had meetings behind doors, closed doors, with members of city council. And what they told us was, where have you guys been? The opposition has been meeting with us for decades. They invite us to their family functions, to their banquets, to their, and so forth. And so hearing this, we actually invited city council members to our banquet, and Sister Linda Sarsour was our keynote speaker. And I had so many of the protesters very angry at this. Why would you allow them to sit and eat dinner with us? They want us to die, right? They don't care about us. And sure enough, the very next day, I get a phone call from the president of Cleveland City Council. Hey, what do you think about that UN ceasefire resolution? We're gonna take a look at it. And the very same week, we came out with a ceasefire resolution for Cleveland. So you're exactly right. It does take those conversations. And then recently, I don't know if you heard about this, but one of our state senators in Ohio actually canceled her trip to Israel, her paid trip to Israel. And she said, yeah. Senator Beth Liston. And she said it was because my constituents reached out to me. They emailed me, they called me, and it started to make me think, okay, let me do my research. And she said, I can't go, I can't be a part of this propaganda. And so you're exactly right, it does take a lot of that. But what do you think is the perfect formula of advocacy? How much protest versus how many, how much, I guess, policy meetings or, legislative meetings versus going out in the streets versus any other form of advocacy? What is the perfect formula?
I actually have a formula written down for you right here.
Ooh.
I've been doing like specific policy advocacy work on the other side. I used to work at the Colorado State Legislature, so I was on the inside, and I would be the one being lobbied. And then the last 4.5 years, I've been on the other side. And there's, I think, 6 ingredients to it. Number 1, it's being in unity and coalitions. Right now, especially, we are obviously living under an authoritarian regime, no questions asked. But we're not the first or the last to be living under one, right? And even before Trump, our language was policed, so on and so forth. Another thing I would like to call out the Muslim community for, aside from not showing up consistently, sorry, I just have to do this, is the lack of intersectionality that exists in our movement. We want people to show up for us, but we do not show up for other people and other movements. And I don't understand how that is possible, especially when our movements and our oppression is so interconnected, right? There's a thing that the oppressors want, which is, it's a tactic called divide and conquer. They want us to play oppression Olympics and just just be so hyper-focused on that we lose sight of the bigger picture and the fact that our oppressor is one. And one of the biggest examples is Israel and the US. Who trains American cops to be as aggressive as they are with the black community? The Israeli occupation forces. That's just one example of many, right? So being in unity and coalitions. And I'm not just talking about CAIR partnering with AMP. I'm talking about we go into the progressive movement. We talk to black organizations. We talk to immigration organizations and so on and so forth because we share a common goal, especially in this moment right now. That's number 1. Number 2 is have clear demands. Last night we heard from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and she literally said, I love seeing you guys, but in the beginning when you guys would, first of all, you don't come enough. And obviously she has her priorities straight. She's the last person that needs to be lobbied. But the feedback she gave is a lot of times people will come into meetings, and it could be a Muslim group, a Palestinian group, and they'll argue in front of her about the priorities. You need to have clear and consistent priorities. Again, Palestine, what are our demands right now? Can somebody tell me what our clear demands of Congress are? Yeah, block the bombs, humanitarian aid, and permanent ceasefire. So you need to have clear and consistent demands. You can't change them every time. This is what we need changed, and we need it changed now. I'm talking about every week. Medea was just telling you, there's an APAC person for every member of Congress, and they're in their office on a weekly basis. How many times do we show up a year? Maybe 2. And we think that just because we're showing up in the masses that it's going to make this huge impact. No, literally, there are staffers that are telling us, why don't you guys show up more? That is embarrassing. We need to show up more. So unity and coalitions, clear demands. The third thing is media strategy. You were just talking about how people love to just be liked, right? At protests, you have everybody fighting for the mic, everybody fighting for an interview. But how many of us are actually paying attention to, number 1, what we're saying, and number 2, what we're sharing on social media? Don't play into sheep politics. Number 1, research what you're sharing and research what you're talking about. Make sure your demands are consistent to the people that are doing the work consistently. I'll never forget when the genocide first started, I was added into all these group chats that were like, what are people doing for Palestine? Why isn't anybody on the Hill? Why isn't anybody on the Hill? Hello? There are so many organizations, AMP, AGP Action, USCPR, IMEU, CAIR, so on and so forth, that do this work on a daily basis, but not enough people listen to their guidance. We do the work for you, and not enough people listen. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants to start their own organization when people are literally killing themselves for the work, right? So pay attention to the strategy, both on media, in person, and when you're talking to members of Congress. Make sure you are consistent. Make sure you're using the right information. Don't do what they do. And we're guilty of this too. I'll see a picture from 2013 in Gaza, and people will be like, this is happening right now. Or like the other day when Lieutenant Tony Aguilera and one of his colleagues went to protest in Congress. Somebody uploaded the video and captioned it saying, these two members refused to fly military planes over Israel. That's not what happened. Like, why are we spreading misinformation, which makes us look bad? It makes us untrustable. So then if we're spreading that misinformation, especially when we're talking to members of Congress, we're not going to be trusted. So fact check. 5, sustained pressure. Consistency. If you take anything away from this, you have to be consistent. I'm talking about if you have one protest a month, you need to be sending 6 emails a month. Okay? That's the balance. 1 protest a month, 6 emails a month. And it should be even more than that. At least every other day, you should be reaching out to your member of Congress. They should know your name. They should know that we exist. They should know that we have clear demands and that we're not just going to come every 3 months when things get really bad all of a sudden. And then when it gets quiet, we're going to settle down. In the very beginning of this, we were making 80% of calls and emails. That was record breaking. Right after the first ceasefire, the phone lines died. We need to, like Ismahan said, Dr. Ismahan said, do we want just like this, the genocide to end, or do we want liberation for Palestinians? And again, this is just one example. You want long-term effects. And 6, final thing, is to leverage political opportunities. Elections. Who is running in your community? Look at them before they win so you can hold them accountable when they win. Who is your member of Congress? Are they doing a bad job? Let them know. Let them know that you will not re-elect them because you are paying their salaries. They work for you. Whether you are involved or not, whether you vote or not, they work for you and their salaries are coming out of your tax dollars. And so you have so many opportunities. You just need to do it consistently.
Thank you. We have about 2 to 3 minutes left for this portion, and then we'll have our little activity, and then we'll wrap up. So who could add to Sister Ayah?
I'm going to add, I think that we also need to think about forms of protest. Talking about your toolkit analogy, I kind of like that. There are die-ins, there are sit-ins, there's silent protest. We are so caught up yelling at people and talking to ourselves, right? When you're in a group that's huge group and you're chanting in Arabi, who are you chanting to? Are you there to be understood and advance your cause? So I think first and foremost, define your audience. Our mass protests are good at showing numbers, but consistent protest needs to take many forms. And that includes advocacy, that includes standing on the street corner with a sign that says, ask me anything about Palestine. Most people don't like to be yelled at. It's pretty self-explanatory. We're fixated in this idea that protest means screaming louder and in people's faces. There's a few people here that join our protests all the time in the DC area. We have given out over 200,000 education flyers just in the last year alone. And that is to people walking by us. We don't know who they are. They could be policymakers at think tanks. They could be CEOs of companies. They could be partners at a law firm. We also find the buildings that house the media organizations, and then we go flyer their cars, because guess who parks in the parking garage under a building that is a media agency? Media people. So if you want to reach the head of NBC, you go to their parking garage. Guess how we meet members of Congress? Medea is always in the halls. It's amazing. We find their cars. And we put flyers in their windows with our demands, and we have been doing that work consistently and quietly, because not all protest is loud, and not all protest is in your face, and not all protest is to ostracize. We need to educate. And if I can just add on that one point, we really, really, really need to look internally and start living our values as Muslims. The amount of self-righteousness and shaming that occurs, you should know about the genocide. It's been going on for 2 years. So I turn around to these very people and I said, what's going on in the DRC right now? Give me all the details. You don't know. So that arrogance that we somehow carry as a chip on our shoulder is a weapon that actually is hurting us, not helping us. Get rid of it. Out. Educate. We have a responsibility to inform, to educate, and to invite people into our spaces. And you do that by making the spaces welcoming, by inviting people to change their perspectives, and don't shame them for being 2 years too late. So much social media right now. Oh yeah, you're spoken out now. Where were you for 2 years? That is your ego speaking. Check it. Correct. And thank you for speaking out, and do more of it. And here's how we can help. Be a resource for change. Be a conduit for information. Be the values that Palestine is teaching the world. Resilience, kindness, showing up, gratitude. We can't just be advocating for Palestine without channeling the values that Palestine is teaching us. So remember that when you go out, ask yourself, what would Palestine want me to be saying right now? Visualize it as a person, as a mother who's watching her child be starved to death. If she had an opportunity to be here, what would she say? She'd probably be asking for people to help her, not screaming at them for not helping her. Channel that. Channel it. You are a conduit. Check your ego. Check our self-righteousness. And if you see others doing it, invite them to change. Invite them to be kind. And remember one thing, and I'm sorry you said 2 minutes, but the one thing I really just want to stress, we need to be the values that we are talking about. And this is important because we are being dehumanized by the media, and so is Palestine. And the last thing we need is more people just screaming in people's faces. That is the exact image that they want us to be. Challenge it by being an advocate that's willing to have a conversation, that's willing, people here know, yesterday I got assaulted. I don't hit back. I don't yell back. I watch it happen. I sadly digest it and just accept it. But guess what happens on the internet when they see the Muslim who's supposed to be reactive and angry not being reactive and angry? We're changing hearts and minds simply by putting that on the internet and letting the world take it and say, this is what Zionism is. Boom. Thank you. You've done my advocacy for me. So don't play into the bait. Don't be what they want us to be. Do not lose our humanity in fighting for humanity of Palestine.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that, Sister Dr. Ismahan?
I think one thing to remember is just stop waiting for perfection. There is no perfect formula. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we're waiting for that perfection, and then so we start criticizing those who have moved already, those who are actually doing actions. So many times, and Ayah and I have worked with each other many times, we'll look back at something, we're like, oh, we could have done that a little bit different. But in that time, we did the best that we could. So I think there's no perfect formula. I think there is, again, go back to the analogy of the toolbox. There's a tool that you can use, and that's going to require us to really just kind of get out of this mindset of waiting for things to be perfect before we can start acting.
Great, thank you. So I have a quick answer to this. Ready? Okay, I'll start with Sister Medea. What is one internal or external challenge that you have found doing the work that you're doing?
Well, it's come up here a lot, which is how to act. And I think the challenge is to not act out of anger and disgust and revolt. And every day when I wake up and see what's happening, I just want to tear my hair out and tear somebody else's hair out too. And so I think it's kind of, letting that turn into inspiration to get out there and do something effective.
Thank you. You are not alone. That is a common feeling I think many of us are feeling. Thank you. Dr. Ismahan?
Internally, for me, I think making sure from a spiritual perspective, you are not giving power away Power belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a divine plan, and it is up to us to make sure that we're acting. So internally staying grounded from a faith perspective. Externally, the challenges are many, but I think we are lacking a vision of what it is that we're trying to build. And that is really, really preventing us from being the powerful group of advocates that we can be. And I'm not talking about it from an organizational perspective. I'm talking about it from a Muslim community perspective. I'm talking about those who are standing up for justice, not just in Palestine, but here as well. We're lacking a vision of what we want to see.
Thank you. So emotional well-being, lacking vision. Okay, internal or external challenge?
Internal for me is mom genocide balance. And I think so often we feel like we have to sacrifice so much of ourselves. Be true to who you are, be true to what you are. This is a long game. And if we can't find that balance, then you burn out. We don't need more people to burn out. We need more people to be honest with what they can provide, with when, and then take the time for self-care. Take the time to hug the people you love. Do not shame yourself or let anyone shame you for being able to do that. That's what makes us human. The external thing I would say is just kind of a little bit similar, is just really trying to find a balance between advocacy and education, and then also unity among causes. Because the challenge with intersectionality, as I see it, is that we want to do everything all the time, and we push that expectation onto others. And if you stand for nothing, you fall for everything, and then you're ineffective. And so don't allow yourselves and our community to be pulled in this idea that everything has to be solved all the time right now, because that's where fatigue comes in, and that's where helplessness comes in, and we need to fight helplessness. We do have power. Helplessness does not help any of our causes. And so figure out a way to shift out of that, and part of it is just owning what you can and being okay with that boundary setting.
Thank you. Burnout, balance, fatigue, boundary setting.
Yeah, externally, I would really, to what they just said, internally, also a balance between like burnout. And I am somebody that like, it's all or nothing for me. And obviously the last 2 years have just been a lot. So I am burnt out, I'm not going to lie. But that combination with sometimes the dehumanization I experience in my work makes me think sometimes like, why is this worth it? I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I'm trying to convince you of something, and sometimes I have to convince myself. So the balance between remembering this is a long-term game and that Allah is the best of all planners, and we just have to trust in Him alongside doing what we need to do.
Great, thank you. So I had a really cool activity planned, but I think I've run out of time, so I'm going to shift and kind of summarize it real fast. Basically, what I was going to say is that every one of you have come here not to just listen, but to be a part of this change, right? And every one of you can be a part of that change. Everybody has a skill or some talent or a connection or something they can contribute, right? So don't be shy. Shout it out. Are you an artist? Do you write poetry? Do you have connections? What do you have? What is a skill that you might have to be able to contribute to the cause, to combat these challenges that we're facing? I want to hear it. Yes?
I'm an organized paralegal.
You're an organized paralegal. So somebody get her name and her contact information, because this is how we're going to make change. We're going to connect to each other and find the talents that will help move this forward. Anybody else? Don't be shy. Yes? Engineering morality, college student. All right, get his contact information. Anybody else on this side? I know you have some talents. Yes.
Before I graduated, I was a graduate student who just in Palestine co-founder, and I also studied
Bioethics and different languages. So she can probably translate those educational materials that you have in different languages so that it reaches more people, right? I know that Sister Aisha over there is knitting. She can probably knit for change, right? Knit for change, make blankets with messages or something. Okay, somebody raised their hand over here. Filmmaker in Texas. Somebody get his contact information. What is your name? Imran? Ghani? Very nice. So I'm serious about talking to each other after this, getting each other's contact information, and making that change happen. Now, do I have like 2 minutes to open up for questions? Okay. Do we have an extra mic or no? Oh, you know, it's okay. They can take my mic. Who has a question, a question, not a statement, a question, has a question mark at the end? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Um, can I talk? Okay, sorry. So my question has to do with what I just said. Have like partaking in advocacy as a student, and then, having the privilege to graduate, but then potentially having opportunities closed off, especially in terms of employment, and how that's more of like a quiet silencing. So my question is kind of twofold. One part of it is, what should people who were in student advocacy do after graduating in their, in terms of like their search for the next step and what they can participate in? And then the other side of it is, how can others help support those people who are now in this transition period and they don't feel that they really have anywhere else to be moving forward for the time being?
Take another question too. Maybe somebody on this side.
So I'm a New York City public school teacher, and a couple days ago I was sent home because of my hijab, and I want to use this space somehow because I'm in this, we're supposed to be neutral, and I really want to be able to use my workplace and not be neutral. So yeah, I really want to be able to do something. I'm so tired of feeling quiet, and I'm kind of with you on the lose your respect thing. And yeah, like what do you do in a workspace where you're supposed to tolerate all the transgender stuff, and it's okay to have, I mean, I'm black, I don't mind the Black Lives Matter stuff and the inclusivity. I'm not trying to be against that. But it's so partial, obviously, the disparities. And I feel like it's a pick and choose. And we're supposed to be having heritage this, heritage that, but it's clearly not open. So I don't want to like jump ship and be out, but I'm trying to look at it and, well, what can I do within the space I'm given instead of giving up but showing out somehow. I really don't know how to do that, but I really want to.
And then we'll take one more question, but real quick. How do we turn this back on? Make sure we talk after this. Okay.
Hey,
One more question. Right here. Yeah. And then
okay. So to the moderator, you shared a story with us about the behind the door meetings at City Council, and they said, "Where have you guys been? You haven't been showing up." And then one of the responses was you invited them to the banquet. Could you just delve a little bit into, besides inviting them to the banquet, how did you guys in that moment respond to, where have you been? You haven't been showing up, and you haven't been inviting us into your community. Then the other person want to come get the mic?
My body came with its own microphone. My question to you is, are you willing to go to engagement@CAIR.com to volunteer? My question. Are you willing to go to engagement@CAIR what?
I was just going to say about the student and then the question about the employment. I know she stepped out, but I think one of the things that we just really need to remember is that we are still trying to beg our way into institutions that are not accepting of us. If there's one thing we can learn from the Zionist example, which we should learn nothing from them, but is that they've built their own spaces. We have enough power to build our own spaces. We have donors, we have funders, we have everything. We have talent, more talent than, it's fascinating. Our community is so knowledgeable, so talented, so amazing, so diverse, so beautiful, but we're not building the spaces that honor ourselves. And so one thing I will say to anybody who's lost employment, speak about it. Everybody who's lost their jobs that has been posting it on LinkedIn and not being ashamed, it is not a shameful thing to be fired for speaking for values for other people. There's no shame in it. No shame in it. Speak up. Say, I lost my job. Who can hire me? Introduce me to 3 people. Own it and make sure people know. I just got chills saying that. I hope more people realize that they are trying to shame us for speaking out. They should be ashamed for firing us. Do not for a minute. So talk to people about it. Get in the media. Post it on your Facebook. Post it on social media. And do not let them for a minute feel like we are lesser than for what we've experienced.
You okay, like I'm telling to end this, but I know we had questions. So we talked about the jobs, and I think that answered 2 questions. And I don't know if there was any other question. The Ohio one. What was our response? You know, I always think it's important to know the audience that you're talking to, right? And so a lot of our Cleveland City Council members are from the African American community, and a lot of the things that have happened to us has happened to them. And probably first, right? And so I would say, you know, what we said to them is like, our community has been disenfranchised just like your community has been disenfranchised. And so we had this belief that the government doesn't represent us, doesn't want to hear us. And so please help us combat that. You know, don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution. And through talks and you know, understanding one another, we were able to get the results that we wanted. And not one that condemned this or that. Not one that left out the word Palestine, because they were going to do that until we talked to them and told them, no, the word Palestine needs to belong in here just like you put the word Israel in here. And so, yeah, and not settling for crumbs, right? Okay, I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately.
Can I add one comment
yes.
here, which is, I think the woman who said about how she had to go home because of the hijab was just asked to go out by Ibrahim Hooper, who is CAIR giving her care. And I think it's a great example of how CAIR is there for the Muslim community.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair. I wanted to say one more time, I'm not kidding. Please get each other's contact information. Please identify what your talents and what you can contribute. And I want to thank everyone for joining the panel. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jazakallah khair. And may Allah bless our